Hashtag Fortune's Trail, Wyoming Territory, 1876. The sun hung low over the snow-capped mountains, turning the vast prairie golden as Elizabeth Prescott stood on the newly constructed porch of her ranch house, surveying land that stretched to the horizon. 20,000 acres that were entirely hers, yet might as well have belonged to the wind for all the good they did her. 3 months since her father's passing, and the Rocking Pea Ranch teetered on the brink of ruin. "I cannot possibly manage this alone," she whispered to no one but the Wyoming breeze. At 26, Elizabeth had inherited not just the ranch but her father's debts, his enemies, and his unfinished dreams. Boston society had taught her to manage a household, to play piano, to charm gentlemen at dinner parties, not to drive cattle or negotiate with ruthless cattle barons like James Thornton, who seemed determined to absorb her land into his empire. The advertisement she'd placed in the Cheyenne newspaper felt like both surrender and her last hope. Experienced ranch hand needed. Must understand cattle management, repair work, and ranch operations. Good wages for capable applicant. What the advertisement didn't say was that the Rocking Pea's finances were stretched thinner than water in a desert. Elizabeth had enough to pay one good man for 6 months. If the ranch wasn't turning a profit by then, she would lose everything. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. A lone rider approached, his form silhouetted against the setting sun, the brim of his hat pulled low. As he came closer, Elizabeth straightened her spine and lifted her chin. First impressions mattered, her mother had taught her. Never let them see weakness. The rider dismounted with fluid grace that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. His horse, a magnificent buckskin, stomped and snorted, kicking up dust in the yard. "Ma'am," he said, removing his hat to reveal sun-streaked brown hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. His face was weathered, tanned by years under the western sun. "Name's Adam Stone. Heard you might be looking for help." Elizabeth assessed him with a careful gaze. His clothes were worn but clean, his boots patched but polished. He had the lean, powerful build of a man who'd worked hard his entire life. "Mr. Stone," she replied with a nod. "What experience do you have with ranching?" A smile touched the corners of his mouth, crinkling the skin around his eyes. "Been working cattle since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, ma'am. Last 5 years at the Circle G over in Montana Territory. Before that, drove cattle up from Texas 3 seasons running." "And why did you leave the Circle G?" Something flickered in his eyes, a shadow that came and went so quickly Elizabeth almost missed it. Owner's son took over. Had different ideas about running things. He shifted his weight, one hand resting on his saddle horn. "I can show you references if you'd like." Elizabeth had planned to interview at least a dozen men before making her decision, but something about Adam Stone's steady gaze made her reconsider. There was honesty in those blue eyes, and the Rocking Pea couldn't afford to wait. "Can you start tomorrow?" she asked. Surprise registered on his face. "You're not going to check those references?" "I have a feeling about you, Mr. Stone." She stepped forward, extending her hand in a manner that would have scandalized her mother's Boston friends. "I believe you're exactly what the Rocking Pea needs." He hesitated only a moment before taking her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, his grip firm but respectful. "There's something you should know, Miss Prescott," he said, his voice lower. "Word in town is that Thornton's been buying up water rights all over the county, and that he's got his eye on this spread." Elizabeth felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. "Then we'll just have to show Mr. Thornton that the Rocking Pea isn't for sale, won't we?" Adam's smile returned, broader this time, revealing a small gap between his front teeth. "Yes, ma'am. I reckon we will." What Elizabeth didn't tell him was that Thornton had already made an offer, one that grew more tempting with each passing day as her financial situation worsened. What Adam didn't tell her was that he knew James Thornton better than he'd let on, and that the wealthy cattle baron had more than just business on his mind when it came to the beautiful young ranch owner. Elizabeth woke before dawn the next morning, dressing quickly in a practical skirt and blouse. She twisted her chestnut hair into a simple knot at the nape of her neck, ignoring the mirror that would have shown dark circles beneath her eyes. Sleep had been elusive, her mind filled with calculations and worries. In the kitchen, she found Adam already stoking the stove, a pot of coffee brewing. He straightened when she entered, looking slightly embarrassed. "Hope you don't mind, ma'am. Early rising's a habit." "Not at all." She watched as he poured 2 cups, offering one to her with a gesture that was neither presumptuous nor servile. Equal. It struck her how rarely she'd been treated as such since her father's death. "I took the liberty of checking the barn and corrals," he said, blowing on his coffee. "You've got good stock, but that north fence line won't last another winter. And your cattle are scattered halfway to the mountains." Elizabeth sighed. "I know. The hands all left after father died. Most went to Thornton's ranch for better pay. We'll round them up," Adam said simply, as though the task of gathering thousands of cattle across miles of open range with just the two of them was nothing extraordinary. "But first, I'd like to see your books, if you don't mind. Need to understand what we're working with." Elizabeth hesitated. Her financial situation was precarious at best, disastrous at worst. Showing Adam the ledgers meant revealing just how desperate things truly were. "I can't pay much," she admitted. "Not yet. But once we get the ranch running properly—" "I didn't come here for money, Miss Prescott." The statement hung between them, prompting the obvious question that Elizabeth felt compelled to ask. "Then why did you come?" Adam set down his cup, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Everyone deserves a fair chance. Your father built something here. I'd hate to see Thornton swallow it up like he's done with half the ranches in the territory." There was something he wasn't saying. Elizabeth was certain of it. But before she could press further, a gunshot echoed from the direction of the north pasture. Adam was moving before the echo faded, grabbing his rifle from where it leaned against the wall. "Stay here," he commanded. But Elizabeth was already reaching for her father's shotgun. "This is my ranch, Mr. Stone," she said, checking that the weapon was loaded. "I don't hide in the house when there's trouble." A flicker of something, respect, perhaps, crossed his face. He nodded once. "Stay behind me, then." They moved swiftly toward the sound, Elizabeth lifting her skirts to keep pace with Adam's long strides. At the edge of the homestead, they spotted 3 riders circling a small group of cattle. One fired his pistol into the air again, causing the animals to bolt in the direction of Thornton land. "Rustlers," Elizabeth whispered. Adam's expression hardened. "Worse. Thornton's men." He stepped forward, raising his rifle but keeping it pointed at the sky. "That's far enough," he called out, his voice carrying across the open ground. The riders turned, and Elizabeth recognized the man in the center, Frank Miller, Thornton's foreman. He nudged his horse forward, a smirk playing on his lips beneath his mustache. Well, if it ain't Adam Stone. Heard you might be in these parts." Miller's gaze slid to Elizabeth, his eyes lingering in a way that made her skin crawl. "Miss Prescott, Mr. Thornton sends his regards. Says his offer still stands. Ranch like this is too much for a woman to handle." Elizabeth stepped forward, ignoring Adam's warning glance. "Please inform Mr. Thornton that the rocking pea is not for sale, and those cattle you're driving off belong to me." Miller laughed, a harsh sound that echoed across the open space. "Cattle need to drink, ma'am. And since Mr. Thornton owns the water rights to Bear Creek now, seems like these beasts are just following their thirst." Adam's finger tightened on his rifle. "Funny thing about water rights, Miller. They don't include stealing stock. Ain't stealing if they wander over on their own." Another rider called out. "Maybe you should build better fences." "Or maybe," Adam replied, his voice dangerously soft, "you boys should ride on back to Thornton and tell him if he wants the rocking pea, he'll have to do better than sending cowards to rustle a few head at dawn." Miller's face darkened. "You always were too big for your britches, Stone. Thornton hasn't forgotten what you did." "Good," Adam said. "Then he'll know I mean business when I say you've got 10 seconds to turn those cattle around." Elizabeth held her breath as tension stretched between the men like a taut rope. Finally, Miller spat on the ground and jerked his head at his companions. "This ain't over," he warned, wheeling his horse around. Not by a long shot. They watched as Thornton's men reluctantly herded the cattle back toward Rocking Pea Land. When they were out of earshot, Elizabeth turned to Adam, questions burning in her eyes. "What did he mean? Thornton hasn't forgotten what you did." Adam's jaw tightened as he lowered his rifle. "Long story. One that doesn't matter much now." He looked at her directly, his expression grave. "But you should know, Thornton and I have history. If that's going to be a problem for you." "The only problem I have," Elizabeth interrupted, "is a powerful man trying to steal what's mine. If you can help me stop him, your history with James Thornton is your own business." She paused, studying him. Unless there's something I should know that might endanger the ranch. I'm listening. There's a cattle buyer coming through next week, Henry Donovan. He's looking for stock to take east on the new railroad. If we can gather your best 100 head and drive them to town, it might be enough to fund the well project. Elizabeth considered this. But we can't gather that many cattle with just the two of us. Adam smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. I took the liberty of sending word to some friends. Good cowboys who owe me favors. They'll work for a share of what we make rather than wages up front. You did this without asking me. Elizabeth felt a flash of irritation. It was her ranch, after all. Adam's smile faded. I'm sorry. I should have consulted you first. He straightened in his saddle, suddenly formal. It won't happen again, Miss Prescott. Elizabeth sighed, her annoyance fading as quickly as it had risen. No, I'm sorry. It's a good plan. I'm just not used to. She gestured vaguely. Partnership? Adam suggested quietly. The word hung between them, laden with meaning beyond their working relationship. Elizabeth felt a warmth creep into her cheeks that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. Yes, she said finally. Partnership. The moment stretched, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then Adam cleared his throat and turned his horse back toward the ranch house. We should head back. Storm's coming. He nodded toward the western horizon where dark clouds were gathering. Your men should arrive tomorrow. We'll need to prepare. As they rode, the first fat drops of rain began to fall. By the time they reached the barn, the sky had opened up completely. They dismounted quickly, leading their horses inside. Elizabeth's hair had come loose from its pins, falling in damp waves around her shoulders. Adam stopped suddenly, staring at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. You look just like her, he murmured, so quietly she almost didn't hear over the rain drumming on the roof. Like who? He blinked, as though coming back to himself. No one. I'm sorry. He turned away to tend to his horse, his shoulders tense beneath his wet shirt. Elizabeth stood dripping on the barn floor, more confused than ever about the man who was becoming increasingly important to her survival, and perhaps to something more personal than the fate of her ranch. Later that night, as rain lashed against the windows of the ranch house, Elizabeth couldn't sleep. She lit a lamp and made her way to her father's study. If Adam knew something about her father's plans, perhaps there were clues in his papers. She spent hours searching through dusty ledgers and correspondence, finding nothing unusual until she opened the bottom drawer of his desk, a drawer that had always been locked during his lifetime. Inside was a stack of letters tied with string, and beneath them, a leather-bound journal. Elizabeth opened the journal with trembling fingers. The first entry was dated 15 years earlier. Took on a new hand today, her father had written. Boy can't be more than 14, but he rides like he was born on horseback. Says his name is Adam Stone. Something in his eyes reminds me of. The entry ended abruptly, as though her father couldn't bring himself to finish the thought. Elizabeth flipped forward, scanning entries that mentioned Adam periodically over a 3-year span. Then, suddenly, the mention stopped. The last reference came after a gap of several months. Word from Montana. The boy is doing well. Better this way. Elizabeth must never know. Elizabeth closed the journal, her mind racing. What must she never know? And why had her father kept track of Adam Stone's whereabouts years after he'd apparently left the rocking pea? As she returned the journal to its hiding place, her eye caught on a framed photograph on the wall. Her mother, who had died when Elizabeth was just 8 years old. Catherine Prescott had been beautiful, with the same chestnut hair Elizabeth had inherited. But looking at the photograph now, Elizabeth noticed something she had never paid attention to before. Her mother's eyes, bright, even in the sepia-toned image, were the exact same shade and shape as Adam Stone's. The realization left her breathless, clinging to the edge of her father's desk as possibilities too shocking to contemplate raced through her mind. Outside, thunder crashed, and the wind howled around the corners of the house like a spirit seeking entry. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed-clean world and a host of new questions that Elizabeth didn't know how to ask. The cowboys Adam had sent for arrived just after dawn. 5 weather-beaten men with quiet competence in their movements and respect in their eyes when they greeted Elizabeth. They called Adam boss, without hesitation, deferring to him in a way that spoke of long-standing loyalty. These are good men, Adam told Elizabeth as they watched the cowboys settle into the bunkhouse. Tom and Will Davis, brothers from Texas. Miguel Reyes, best roper I've ever seen. Charlie Blackwell, tracker extraordinaire. And old Joe Fletcher. He's forgotten more about cattle than most men will ever know. Elizabeth nodded, memorizing names and faces. And they're willing to work for a share rather than wages? They trust me, Adam said simply. And they're betting on you. On me? They don't even know me. Adam's gaze was steady. I told them about you. How you're fighting to keep this place going instead of selling out. Men like these respect that kind of determination. For the next few days, Elizabeth watched as the ranch came alive with activity. The men rode out at dawn, returning at dusk covered in dust, but satisfied with their progress. Each night, they gathered around the fire outside the bunkhouse, sharing stories and laughter that carried to the main house, where Elizabeth sat on the porch, listening. On the third evening, she surprised them by bringing a pot of coffee and joining their circle. The men fell silent at first, uncertain, but Adam smoothly made space for her on the log beside him. Miss Prescott makes the best apple pie in the territory, he announced, and Elizabeth realized he must have sampled the one she'd baked the previous day while she was occupied with the books. That's so. Old Joe rubbed his grizzled chin. Been a while since I tasted proper pie. I'll bake one tomorrow, Elizabeth promised, warming to their cautious welcome. Careful, ma'am, Tom Davis warned with a grin. Offer pie to a bunch of cowboys, and we might never leave. Would that be so terrible? Elizabeth asked, surprising herself with the question. The rocking pea could use good men permanently. A thoughtful silence fell over the group. It was Charlie who finally spoke up. Depends on what happens with Thornton, I reckon. Word is, he's not too happy about this gathering. Elizabeth glanced at Adam, who was staring into the fire, his profile sharp in the flickering light. What exactly is the history between you and James Thornton? She asked, directing her question to him specifically. The other men exchanged glances, clearly aware of something she was not. Adam took a slow sip of coffee before answering. I worked for him. Briefly. We had a disagreement about his methods. What kind of methods? Elizabeth pressed. Miguel Reyes spoke up, his accent softening his words. Thornton believes in taking what he wants, senorita. When smaller ranchers cannot pay their debts, he offers to buy them out for pennies. If they refuse, he made a gesture of something being crushed in his fist. And Adam opposed this, Elizabeth surmised, watching Adam's face. Let's just say, Adam replied carefully, that Thornton and I have different ideas about what makes a man successful. The conversation shifted to safer topics, the cattle they'd rounded up, the condition of the stock, plans for the drive to town. But later, as the fire burned low and the men drifted off to the bunkhouse, Adam walked Elizabeth back to the main house. There's something you're not telling me, she said when they reached the porch, her voice low but firm. Something about my father and about you. I found his journal. Adam stopped, his body going still in the moonlight. What did it say? Enough to make me curious. He wrote about you, a 14-year-old boy who reminded him of someone he couldn't bring himself to name. Elizabeth took a deep breath. You have my mother's eyes, Mr. Stone. Adam looked away, his hands clenching at his sides. It's late, Miss Prescott. We have an early start tomorrow. Don't you dare walk away from me, Elizabeth said, her voice trembling with emotion. Not now? Not when I'm finally putting the pieces together. He turned back to her, his expression tortured. What do you want me to say? The truth. Was my father yours as well? The question hung in the night air between them, surrounded by the chorus of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. Adam's shoulders sagged, as though a great weight had finally become too much to bear. No, he said softly. William Prescott was not my father. Relief flooded Elizabeth, followed immediately by confusion. Then why? But Catherine Prescott was my mother. The words struck Elizabeth like a physical blow. She reached for the porch railing to steady herself, her mind reeling. That's impossible. My mother died when I was 8. You would have been 17, Adam supplied. By then, I'd already been gone from her life for 3 years. She never spoke of me to you. Elizabeth shook her head, numb with shock. No, never. How could she have a son I knew nothing about? Adam's laugh was hollow, devoid of humor. Your mother had a life before she met your father, Elizabeth. A young girl from a poor family, seduced and abandoned by a man who promised her the world. That was the world I was born into. But then how did she end up with my father? And why weren't you with them? With us. Your father, William, He loved her. Truly loved her, despite her past, despite me. He married her. Tears spilled down Elizabeth's cheeks as decades of family secrets unraveled before her. Why did you come back? After all this time? Adam reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded letter, the paper worn with age. Your father wrote to me when he knew he was dying. Asked me to look out for you, for the ranch. Said he owed it to Catherine to make sure both her children were provided for. So you came out of obligation, Elizabeth whispered, feeling suddenly cold despite the warm night air. I came because this land is as much a part of me as it is of you. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his eyes, her mother's eyes. I came because you're my sister, and family protects its own. Elizabeth shook her head slowly, backing away. Half-sister, she corrected automatically, then immediately regretted the distinction when she saw pain flash across his face. I'm sorry, this is too much. I need time. Adam nodded, replacing the letter in his pocket. I understand. For what it's worth, I'd planned to tell you after the cattle drive, when the ranch was secure. And if the drive fails? If we lose everything to Thornton? That won't happen, he said with quiet conviction. I promise you that. He turned to go, but Elizabeth called after him, one last question burning in her mind. What did Thornton have to do with all this? Why does he hate you so much? Adam paused, looking back over his shoulder. That's a story for another night. His smile was sad, tinged with something darker. But let's just say James Thornton has a particular interest in the Prescott family. Always has. With that cryptic remark, he walked away, leaving Elizabeth alone on the porch with the fragments of her shattered family history scattered at her feet like broken glass. Inside her father's study, she pulled out the journal again, reading it with new understanding. There were gaps in Adam's story, things he hadn't explained. And somewhere in these pages, she sensed, lay the key to James Thornton's obsession with her family. Dawn was breaking before she found it. A brief entry dated 20 years earlier. Catherine ended her engagement to James today. He did not take the news well. Threatened her, threatened me. I fear this is not the end of the matter. Elizabeth closed the journal, a chill running down her spine. Her mother had been engaged to James Thornton before meeting her father, which meant Thornton's vendetta against the Prescotts, against the Rocking P, was personal, rooted in decades of bitterness and rejection. And now she understood why Adam had really come back. Not just for her, not just for the ranch, but to face the man who had been his mother's first choice. A man who might well have been his father in another life. The cattle drive would bring everything to a head. Elizabeth was certain of that now. And when it did, the truth would finally come to light. All of it, not just the carefully edited version Adam had shared. The question was, would the Rocking P and the fragile bond between newfound siblings survive the revelation? The day of the cattle drive dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for moving stock. Elizabeth, dressed in men's trousers beneath a split skirt, a scandalous but practical choice, watched as Adam and the others gathered the selected cattle in the home pasture. She hadn't spoken privately with Adam since his revelation 3 nights earlier, maintaining a polite distance that neither acknowledged nor denied their newfound connection. The other men sensed the tension but attributed it to nerves about the drive. Miss Prescott, Adam approached, leading her horse. Are you certain you want to come along? Town's rough this time of year with so many drovers passing through. This is my ranch, my cattle, my deal. Elizabeth replied firmly. I'll see it through. A flash of pride crossed his face. Familial pride, she realized with a jolt. Never doubted you would. Just wanted to give you the option. The drive itself was harder work than Elizabeth had imagined, despite the relatively short distance to town. Keeping the cattle moving in the right direction required constant vigilance, quick reactions, and an intuitive understanding of how the animals thought. By midday, her muscles ached, and dust coated her throat, but exhilaration hummed through her veins. This was ranching, real ranching, not the sanitized version she'd observed from the house during her father's time. She belonged out here under the vast sky, working alongside these men, directing the future of the Rocking P with her own hands. They made camp that evening at the halfway point. The cattle settled in a natural basin with good grazing. After a simple supper of beans and biscuits, Elizabeth found herself sitting beside Adam, away from the others. You're a natural, he said quietly. Catherine would be proud. Elizabeth studied his profile, searching for resemblances to herself, to their mother. Tell me about her, as you remember her. My memories are a child's memories. Adam's expression softened, his gaze distant. She was kind. Even when she couldn't acknowledge me publicly, she found ways to show she cared. A new shirt appearing mysteriously in my quarters. My favorite dessert in the bunkhouse. Sometimes she'd come to the corrals when I was working, just to watch. He smiled faintly. She'd hum while she watched. Always the same melody. Shenandoah, Elizabeth whispered. She used to sing it as a lullaby. Adam nodded. That's the one. For a moment, they were united in shared memory, the revelation of their kinship a bridge rather than a barrier. Then Adam cleared his throat. You should know something before we reach town tomorrow. About Thornton. Elizabeth tensed. You think he'll be there? I'm counting on it. The cattle buyer, Donovan, is his brother-in-law. At Elizabeth's alarmed look, he quickly added, Donovan's honest, despite the connection. But Thornton will know about the drive, and he'll see it as an opportunity. An opportunity for what? Adam hesitated. To offer you a deal when you're most vulnerable. If Donovan's price isn't enough to save the ranch, Thornton will be waiting with an offer, one that will seem generous in the moment. I won't sell to him, Elizabeth stated firmly. Not after everything you've told me. It's more complicated than that. Adam ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. Thornton doesn't just want the land. He wants legitimacy, respectability. Things your father had that he's always coveted. Understanding dawned slowly, horribly. He wants me, Elizabeth whispered. A marriage alliance. Adam nodded grimly. It's the perfect solution in his mind. He gets the rocking P, the Prescott name, and revenge all in one stroke. Revenge for my mother choosing my father over him. Elizabeth felt sick at the thought. He's old enough to be my father. Age has nothing to do with it. It's power he's after. Adam's voice hardened. I won't let it happen, Elizabeth. I promised our mother on her deathbed that I'd protect you if it ever came to this. Elizabeth stared at him. You spoke to her before she died? You said you'd already left. A shadow crossed his face. I came back when William wrote that she was failing. Saw her just once, in secret. His voice roughened with emotion. She made me promise to watch over you if Thornton ever became a threat. She knew him better than anyone, knew what he was capable of. And what exactly is he capable of? Elizabeth asked, dreading the answer. Adam's eyes met hers, their blue depths troubled. Anything. Everything. The man you see in town, the respected cattle baron? That's a mask. Underneath is someone who believes the world owes him whatever he desires. And he desires you, the rocking P, and the destruction of everyone who ever stood in his way. Including you. Especially me. Adam's smile was grim. In Thornton's mind, I'm the living proof of Catherine's disgrace, the son of the man she fell for before him. A constant reminder that he wasn't her first choice. Elizabeth processed this, connecting threads that had seemed disparate before. So when you worked for him briefly, he didn't know who I was, not at first. By the time he figured it out, I'd already witnessed enough of his methods to be dangerous to him. Adam's voice dropped lower. That's when things turned ugly. Before Elizabeth could ask for details, Miguel approached from the main camp. Riders coming, Chief, he said to Adam, his expression serious. From the direction of town. Adam was on his feet instantly, reaching for his rifle. How many? 6, maybe 7. Arm. Elizabeth stood too, brushing dust from her clothes. Thornton's men. Most likely, Adam confirmed. Elizabeth, I want you to. If you say hide, or stay back, I'll never forgive you, she interrupted. This is my ranch, my cattle, my fight. A reluctant smile touched his lips. I was going to say get your shotgun. We're stronger together. Pride swelled in Elizabeth's chest as she retrieved her weapon. Together, she and Adam walked to meet the approaching riders, the rest of their small crew falling in behind them. The moon illuminated the scene as Thornton's men drew near, Frank Miller in the lead, flanked by hired guns whose expressions ranged from bored to predatory. But it was the man at the center of the group that caught Elizabeth's attention. Older, distinguished, with silver threading through his dark hair and cold eyes that assessed everything with calculation. James Thornton himself had come to call. Miss Prescott. He greeted her, tipping his hat with exaggerated courtesy. What a pleasant surprise. I had no idea you'd be accompanying this little venture. His gaze slid to Adam, hardening instantly. Stone. Thornton, Adam replied, his voice neutral but his stance ready. Thornton smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Adam turned to her, determination etched in every line of his face. Because Thornton made one critical mistake years ago, and he's about to make another. What mistake? He underestimated a Prescott woman once before. Adam's smile held a fierce pride. History has a way of repeating itself. As they rejoined the others, Elizabeth found herself drawing strength from Adam's confidence. For the first time since her father's death, she felt truly connected to the legacy of the Rocking P, not just through land and cattle, but through blood and shared purpose. Tomorrow would indeed decide the future of the ranch, but it would be on her terms, not James Thornton's. And with her brother at her side, she finally believed that future could be secured. What she didn't know was that Adam had one last card to play, a secret he'd kept even from her, one that would either save the Rocking P or destroy any chance of reconciliation between them. The town of Clearwater Creek bustled with activity as Elizabeth and her small crew drove their cattle into the holding pens near the railroad depot. Cowboys from other ranches called greetings, merchants hawked their wares from storefronts, and the saloons did brisk business despite the early hour. Henry Donovan met them at the pens, a short, portly man with shrewd eyes and a businessman's assessing gaze. "Fine-looking stock, Miss Prescott," he commented after walking among the cattle. "Your father always did breed quality animals." "Thank you, Mr. Donovan," Elizabeth replied, watching him carefully for any sign of Thornton's influence. "We're hoping for a fair price." "Always fair, ma'am. That's my reputation." He pulled out a small notebook. "Market in Chicago's strong right now. I can offer you $12 a head." Adam stepped forward. "The going rate for prime stock is 15, Donovan. You know that as well as I do." Donovan squinted at Adam, recognition dawning. "Stone, didn't know you were working the Rocking P these days." He glanced between Adam and Elizabeth. "14's my best offer, considering the transport costs." Elizabeth calculated quickly. At $14 per head for 100 cattle, they'd clear $1,400, enough to fund the well project and have some left over for other improvements. It was a fair offer, perhaps even generous. "We accept," she said before Adam could negotiate further. "Cash, if you please." Donovan smiled, extending his hand. "Done. I'll have the bank draft ready within the hour. Pleasure doing business with you, Miss Prescott." As Donovan walked away, Adam gave her a questioning look. "We might have gotten $14.50, or we might have pushed too hard and lost the sale," Elizabeth countered. "This is enough, Adam. Enough to start making real changes at the ranch." His expression softened. "You're right. It's a good deal." He looked around the bustling street. "I need to speak with the blacksmith about some repairs while we're here. Will you be all right for an hour or so?" Elizabeth nodded. "I'll collect the bank draft and purchase supplies. We can meet at the general store at noon." As Adam walked away, Elizabeth couldn't help but notice how many people greeted him, some warmly, others with wary respect. He was known here, more so than she had realized. Another reminder of how little she truly knew about her half-brother's life during the years they'd been separated. She completed her business at the bank, tucking the draft securely into her inner pocket, then headed to the general store to arrange for supplies. The owner, Mrs. Fletcher, was filling her order when the bell above the door jingled. Elizabeth turned to see a woman enter, elegant, perhaps 40, with carefully styled blonde hair and an expensive dress that looked out of place in the frontier town. "Mrs. Thornton," Mrs. Fletcher greeted nervously. "What can I do for you today?" Elizabeth stiffened at the name. This was James Thornton's wife, the sister of Henry Donovan. "Just some ribbon, Martha," the woman replied, her voice cultured, with traces of an Eastern accent. Her gaze fell on Elizabeth, curiosity flickering in her pale blue eyes. "You must be Miss Prescott." "I'm Eleanor Thornton." Elizabeth nodded politely. "A pleasure, Mrs. Thornton. My husband mentioned he encountered you last evening. He was quite impressed." Eleanor selected a length of blue ribbon, her movements graceful and precise. "He rarely speaks so highly of business associates." "I wasn't aware Mr. Thornton and I were associates," Elizabeth replied carefully. Eleanor's smile was brittle. Perhaps future associates would be more accurate. She paid for her purchase, then lowered her voice. "A word of advice, Miss Prescott, from someone who understands James better than most. Don't refuse his dinner invitation tonight. It will go better for everyone if you hear what he has to say." Before Elizabeth could respond, Eleanor continued in a normal tone. I do hope you'll join us at the Founders' Day celebration next month. The Rocking Pea has always been represented, and it would be a shame to break tradition. With that, she swept out of the store, leaving Elizabeth puzzled by the strange interaction. Had Eleanor been warning her or threatening her? Mrs. Fletcher sighed heavily once the door closed. Poor woman. 20 years married to that man would take the spirit out of anyone. Is she unhappy? Elizabeth asked, suddenly curious about the woman who had taken the place her mother had rejected. Lonely, I'd say. Thornton keeps her like a bird in a gilded cage. Brought her out from Philadelphia when he built that big house of his. But she's never quite fit in here. Mrs. Fletcher wrapped Elizabeth's purchases in brown paper. Between you and me, Miss Prescott, there's talk that she's planning to leave him. Go back east to her family. Elizabeth absorbed this information thoughtfully. Thornton's wife was unhappy and possibly leaving him. His business partner, her brother-in-law, conducted deals that Thornton might not fully approve of. And now Thornton was pursuing Elizabeth and the Rocking Pea with renewed determination. The pieces were aligning differently than she'd assumed. Perhaps Thornton's interest wasn't just about old grudges and land acquisition. Perhaps he was a man watching his carefully constructed empire beginning to crumble. She was still pondering this when Adam found her an hour later, his expression grim. What's wrong? She asked as they walked toward the hotel where their crew would spend the night. Thornton's been busy, Adam replied quietly. He's calling in loans all over the county, pressuring small ranchers to sell before winter sets in. And he's telling everyone who'll listen that the Rocking Pea is next. Elizabeth clutched her bag of supplies tighter. He can't know our financial situation. Not exactly. He doesn't need to. He's creating a narrative. The struggling young woman who inherited a ranch she can't possibly manage. Adam's jaw tightened, and positioning himself as the solution. Through marriage, Elizabeth concluded, remembering Eleanor Thornton's strained smile. But he already has a wife. Adam stopped walking, turning to face her directly. For now, but divorce laws in the territory are simpler than back east. And Thornton always finds a way to get what he wants. A chill ran through Elizabeth despite the warm afternoon sun. I received an invitation to dine with him tonight. From Eleanor herself. Alarm flashed across Adam's features. You're not going. I think I should, Elizabeth countered. Better to know what he's planning than to wonder. It's too dangerous. Thornton doesn't issue invitations without purpose. Exactly. And I need to understand that purpose. Elizabeth squared her shoulders. Besides, it's a public venue, the hotel dining room. What could possibly happen? Adam's expression darkened. You don't know him like I do, Elizabeth. Public settings just mean witnesses to whatever story he wants to tell. Then come with me, she suggested. As my foreman. It would be expected. He hesitated, clearly torn between protecting her and potentially provoking Thornton further. If I'm there, he won't speak freely. He'll see it as a challenge. Good, Elizabeth said firmly. Let him know I'm not alone in this fight. After a long moment, Adam nodded reluctantly. All right, but we set terms. We leave together, we don't separate, and at the first sign of trouble, we walk away. Agreed. Elizabeth felt a surge of confidence. With Adam beside her, she could face whatever scheme Thornton had devised. That evening, dressed in her finest, a dark green dress that had belonged to her mother, carefully altered to fit her slimmer frame, Elizabeth entered the hotel dining room with Adam at her side. Heads turned as they passed, curious glances and whispered comments following in their wake. James Thornton awaited them at a corner table, rising as they approached. If he was surprised by Adam's presence, he concealed it well. Miss Prescott, how lovely you look tonight. His gaze flicked dismissively to Adam. I don't recall extending the invitation to your employee. Mr. Stone represents the interests of the Rocking Pea. Elizabeth replied smoothly, taking the seat Adam held for her. As such, his presence is appropriate for any business discussion. Thornton's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course. How forward-thinking of you. He resumed his seat, signaling a waiter. Shall we begin with wine? I've taken the liberty of selecting a rather exceptional Bordeaux. The meal progressed with superficial pleasantries, Thornton expertly steering the conversation through safe topics. The weather, the upcoming Founders' Day celebration, mutual acquaintances in the territory. It wasn't until dessert was served that he finally addressed the purpose of the meeting. I understand congratulations are in order, he said, sipping his wine. Henry tells me you received a very fair price for your cattle. Mr. Years, actually. Thornton's attention returned to Elizabeth. Since the day I learned William Prescott was ill, some opportunities are worth waiting for. Elizabeth felt as though the room were tilting, the carefully constructed future she'd been building since her father's death crumbling beneath her. And if I agree to your proposal, what happens to my current employees? To the Rocking P name? They would serve at my discretion, of course. Thornton glanced at Adam. Though some might find employment elsewhere more suitable. As for the name, it would remain as a tribute to your father's legacy, under my management. Elizabeth stood abruptly, unable to bear another moment in Thornton's presence. I need time to consider. Of course. Thornton rose as well, all smooth courtesy once more. The offer remains open until noon tomorrow. After that, I'm afraid business considerations must take precedence over sentiment. Adam guided Elizabeth from the dining room, his hand steady at her elbow despite the tension evident in every line of his body. They walked in silence until they reached the privacy of the hotel's small garden. $10,000, Elizabeth whispered, the enormity of the sum overwhelming her. My father never told me it was so much. He was protecting you, Adam replied gently, and he believed he had time to resolve it before. He trailed off, no need to finish the thought. What am I going to do? Even if we sold every head of cattle on the Rocking P, it wouldn't be enough. Adam's expression was unreadable in the dim light of the garden lanterns. There's a way, Elizabeth. One your father arranged before he died. She looked at him sharply. What do you mean? William Prescott knew this day might come. He knew Thornton would never stop trying to take what had once been denied him. Adam took a deep breath. That's why he left something in my keeping. Something that could save the Rocking P and you. What are you talking about? Instead of answering directly, Adam reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document, different from the one Thornton had presented. This is your father's will. The real one, not the version filed with the county clerk. Elizabeth stared at the paper, confused. I don't understand. The will everyone knows about left the Rocking P solely to you. This version includes a codicil, a provision your father asked me to reveal only if Thornton ever threatened the ranch directly. Adam handed her the document. Read it. With trembling fingers, Elizabeth unfolded the paper, recognizing her father's handwriting. The main provisions were, as she remembered, the ranch, the stock, all assets bequeathed to her. But at the bottom was an additional paragraph she had never seen. In recognition of services rendered and promises kept, I hereby designate Adam Stone as equal partner and co-owner of the Rocking P Ranch, with all rights and responsibilities therein. This partnership to be revealed only in the event that the future of the ranch or my daughter's independence is threatened by James Thornton or his associates. Elizabeth looked up from the document, stunned. My father made you co-owner of the Rocking P? Why wouldn't he tell me this? He hoped it would never be necessary, Adam explained quietly. The partnership was his insurance policy, his way of ensuring Thornton could never force you into marriage to save the ranch. Because I wouldn't have sole authority to make such a decision, Elizabeth realized slowly. Any transfer of ownership would require your consent as well. Adam nodded. Exactly. And there's more. He withdrew another document, this one bearing an official bank seal. Your father didn't just leave me partnership rights. He left funds in trust as well. Not enough to clear all the debts, but combined with today's cattle sale and some creative refinancing, enough to keep Thornton at bay. Elizabeth felt as though the ground beneath her feet had shifted once again. You've had the means to save the ranch all this time, and you said nothing? Let me believe we were on the brink of losing everything. Pain flickered across Adam's features. I needed to know if you could run the Rocking P on your own terms. Not as your father's daughter, not as Thornton's prize, but as Elizabeth Prescott, rancher. And you've proven you can. His voice softened with pride. These past months, you've shown more courage and determination than most men I've known. The money, the partnership, they're safety nets. But you've earned the right to stand without them if you choose. Emotions warred within Elizabeth. Relief that the ranch could be saved, anger at the secrets kept from her, confusion about what this partnership truly meant. So what happens now? That depends on you, Adam replied. We can reveal the partnership tomorrow, use the funds to negotiate with Thornton. Or, he hesitated. You could take the money and run the ranch as you've been doing, sole owner, no partnership. Your father left that choice to you. Elizabeth studied her half-brother's face in the lantern light. And if I choose independence, what happens to you? A sad smile touched his lips. I'll move on. There's always work for a good cowboy. The realization of what he was offering struck Elizabeth with sudden force. Adam was willing to walk away from his inheritance, from his rightful place at the Rocking P, if that was what she wanted. He had come not to claim what was his, but to ensure she had the freedom to choose her own path. That, she understood now, was true partnership, not Thornton's vision of dominance disguised as protection, but Adam's willingness to share both the burden and the decision. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course. He started to turn away, but she caught his arm. Not alone, Elizabeth clarified. I need time to think about how we're going to tell Thornton that the Rocking P has two owners now, and neither of us is for sale. The hope that blazed in Adam's eyes was answer enough. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as partners, as siblings, as Prescotts. But as they walked back toward the hotel, neither noticed the figure watching from the shadows, a witness to their garden conference who now hurried toward Thornton's residence with news that would change everything. James Thornton's fury, when it erupted the following morning, was cold and calculating rather than explosive. Elizabeth and Adam faced him in the bank president's office, the contested documents spread across the polished desk between them. A convenient development, Thornton remarked, his voice deceptively mild as he examined the codicil to William Prescott's will. Almost too convenient, one might say. The document is legitimate, the bank president, Harold Wilson, confirmed reluctantly. I witnessed it signing myself, at William's request. Thornton's gaze sharpened. And you kept this information private? Despite your responsibilities to this institution? Wilson shifted uncomfortably. I was bound by client confidentiality, James. William made it clear the provision was to remain sealed unless specific circumstances arose. Circumstances such as my proposal to Miss Prescott, Thornton concluded, his smile tight and dangerous. How very paternal of William to arrange such protection. He turned his attention to Adam. And how fortunate for you, Mr. Stone, to find yourself suddenly elevated from hired hand to property owner. Adam met his gaze steadily. William Prescott was a fair man. He rewarded loyalty. Did he indeed? Thornton leaned forward. Tell me, does Miss Prescott know exactly why her father felt such generosity toward you was warranted? Has she heard the full story of Catherine Prescott's indiscretions? Elizabeth's spine stiffened. If you're referring to the fact that Adam is my half-brother, Mr. Thornton, yes, I'm well aware of our relationship. Surprise flickered briefly across Thornton's features before his composure returned. Half-brother. How quaint. His cold eyes assessed Adam with new interest. So William acknowledged you after all. I wonder what changed his mind after so many years of keeping you at arm's length. My father did what he thought was right, Elizabeth interjected, unwilling to let Thornton dominate the conversation. Just as Adam and I are doing now. We're prepared to negotiate terms for repayment of the loans you've acquired, Mr. Thornton, at fair market interest. Thornton's laugh held no humor. My dear Miss Prescott, you misunderstand the situation. I didn't purchase your father's debts as an investment. I acquired them as leverage. He rose from his chair, buttoning his expensive jacket with deliberate precision. The offer I made last night is withdrawn. You have until the end of the month to repay the notes in full, or the Rocking P will be sold at auction. That's less than 2 weeks, Elizabeth protested. You know that's not enough time to arrange financing. Perhaps you should have considered that before rejecting a perfectly reasonable proposal. Thornton gathered his hat and gloves. Good day, Miss Prescott, Mr. Stone. I look forward to the auction. I understand the main house has quite a pleasant view. After he departed, a heavy silence filled the bank president's office. Wilson sighed deeply, removing his spectacles to polish them with a handkerchief. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. If there was anything I could do to extend the deadline. But there isn't, she finished for him, understanding the constraints he faced. Thank you for confirming the documents, at least. Outside the bank, Elizabeth and Adam paused on the boardwalk, watching Thornton stride purposefully toward the saloon where several of his men waited. He won't stop, Adam said quietly. Not now? This has become personal. Elizabeth nodded, a plan already forming in her mind. Then we need to make it business again. Something so advantageous he can't refuse. Adam gave her a questioning look. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to speak with Eleanor Thornton, Elizabeth replied. Woman to woman. Finding surprise registered on Eleanor's face, followed by suspicion. Why would you make such an offer to a stranger? Because we believe in fairness, Elizabeth said. And because James Thornton has hurt enough people in his pursuit of power, including you. For a long moment, Eleanor stood motionless, weighing their offer against decades of loyalty to a man who had shown her none in return. Then she moved to the minister's desk, withdrew paper and pen, and began to write. James has been liquidating assets for months, she explained as she worked, quietly selling parcels of land, cattle, even shares in the mining venture north of here. The drought last year hit him harder than anyone knows. He leveraged everything on a cattle drive that lost nearly half its stock crossing the desert. She continued writing, listing names, dates, amounts, creating a detailed map of Thornton's financial vulnerabilities. He's extended beyond his means to purchase your father's debts, Miss Prescott. The bank in Denver is pressuring him for repayment of his own loans. That's why he needs the rocking P. And you, so desperately. Without new assets to secure his position, his entire operation could collapse within months. Elizabeth and Adam exchanged glances. This was more than they had hoped for, not just information, but ammunition. There's one more thing you should know, Eleanor added, setting down her pen. James has arranged for certain documents to disappear from the county records office tomorrow night. Documents pertaining to water rights along the eastern boundary of the Rocking P. The boundary with Thornton land, Adam realized. He's trying to erase the legal record of where the property lines fall. Eleanor nodded. The drought has made water more valuable than gold. If he controls those rights, he controls the fate of every ranch in the valley. She handed the completed document to Elizabeth. This is everything I know about his finances, his plans, his weaknesses. Use it wisely. Her gaze turned to Adam. And watch your back. James has never forgotten or forgiven any slight. He speaks of you often, Mr. Stone, and never kindly. Thank you, Mrs. Thornton, Elizabeth said, carefully folding the paper. Your courage won't be forgotten. A ghost of a smile touched Eleanor's lips. Perhaps in helping you, I finally helped myself as well. She moved toward the door. Now, if you'll excuse me, the children will be returning soon. As Eleanor Thornton returned to her teaching duties, Elizabeth and Adam walked quickly toward the hotel, their minds racing with the implications of what they'd learned. Thornton's vulnerable, Adam said in a low voice. More than anyone realized. Yes, but he's also desperate, Elizabeth countered. And that makes him dangerous. We need to move quickly, before he realizes Eleanor has helped us. They spent the remainder of the day crafting their strategy, consulting with Harold Wilson at the bank, and sending telegrams to contacts Adam had in Denver. By evening, they had assembled the outline of a plan that might save not just the Rocking P, but potentially other small ranchers threatened by Thornton's expansion. Their crew, seeing the determination in their faces, asked few questions but prepared to leave at dawn. Whatever battle was brewing, they would stand with the Prescotts against Thornton and his men. As night fell, Elizabeth sat on the hotel porch, watching the town settle into evening routines, saloon doors swinging, lamps being lit, families gathering for supper. Adam joined her, offering a cup of coffee. Second thoughts? He asked, noticing her pensive expression. Not about our plan, she replied. It's the right thing to do. I'm just thinking about Eleanor, about the choices she made, or didn't get to make. Adam nodded, understanding. 20 years with a man like Thornton would wear down anyone's spirit. That could have been my mother's life, Elizabeth mused, if she hadn't chosen father instead. Catherine Prescott was stronger than people gave her credit for, Adam said softly. Like her daughter. Elizabeth smiled at him, grateful for the comparison. And her son. They sat in companionable silence, drinking their coffee as stars appeared overhead. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, possibly danger, as they implemented their plan to outmaneuver Thornton. But tonight, in this moment of calm, Elizabeth felt a peace she hadn't experienced since her father's death. She had found not just a partner in running the Rocking P, but family, a connection to her past, and a companion for the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them knowing she was no longer alone. What she couldn't know was that Thornton had already set his own plans in motion, plans that would bring their conflict to a far more dangerous conclusion than either of them anticipated. As they prepared to leave the hotel the following morning, a breathless messenger found them at the stables. "Miss Prescott," the boy called, waving a telegram. "Urgent message from the Rocking P." Elizabeth took the paper with trembling hands, Adam looking over her shoulder as she unfolded it. The message was brief but devastating. "Fire at North Range, stop, main house, threatened, stop, Thornton men seen nearby, stop, return immediately, stop." Their eyes met over the telegram, the same realization reflected in both their faces. Thornton had escalated beyond business tactics to outright destruction. The battle for the Rocking P had just become a fight for survival itself. The journey back to the ranch was a race against time, pushing their horses to the limit as smoke billowed on the horizon. They left the supply wagon and most of the crew behind, taking only Miguel and the Davis brothers with them. As they crested the final ridge overlooking the Rocking P, Elizabeth's heart sank. The fire had consumed much of the north pasture, blackening the land and sending terrified cattle scattering in all directions. A line of ranch hands and neighbors formed a desperate barrier between the advancing flames and the main house, using wet blankets and shovels to beat back the fire. There, Adam pointed toward the eastern edge of the blaze, where several riders watched from a safe distance. Even at this range, the distinctive gray horse at the center of the group was unmistakable, Thornton's prized stallion. "He's actually here," Elizabeth breathed, shock giving way to fury, watching his handiwork. "Stay with Miguel," Adam instructed, his voice tight with controlled rage. "Help with the fire line. Tom, Will with me." Before Elizabeth could protest, the three men were spurring their horses toward Thornton and his observers. She hesitated only a moment before following Miguel toward the fire line, knowing that saving the ranch had to take priority over confrontation. For hours, they battled the flames alongside neighbors who had seen the smoke and come to help. Elizabeth worked until her arms ached and her lungs burned from smoke, passing buckets, stamping out embers, directing efforts to save the barn and corrals. Through sheer determination and the blessing of a wind that finally shifted eastward, they managed to halt the fire's advance before it reached the main buildings. It was nearly dusk when Adam returned, his face streaked with soot and a grim satisfaction in his eyes. "Thornton's gone," he reported, accepting a dipper of water from Miguel. Denied any involvement, of course, but his men were less convincing. Frank Miller had burn marks on his coat sleeves. "Did you confront them directly?" Elizabeth asked, wiping sweat from her forehead. Adam's smile was cold. "Let's just say Thornton received a message he won't soon forget, and he won't be sitting comfortably in a saddle for a few days." Despite her exhaustion, Elizabeth felt a fierce pride in her brother's defense of their land. "Good, though I doubt this is the end of it." "No," Adam agreed, surveying the smoldering landscape. "But it's a beginning. Thornton crossed a line today, attacking property, endangering lives. Even his supporters in town will question such tactics." They worked through the night, ensuring no hidden embers reignited, comforting frightened animals, and assessing the damage. By dawn, it was clear the Rocking P had been fortunate. The fire had destroyed grazing land but spared structures and most of the herd. As Elizabeth stood on the porch, watching the sunrise illuminate the scarred landscape, Adam joined her with 2 steaming cups of coffee. "It will recover," he said, following her gaze across the blackened pasture. "First rain will bring new growth. By spring, you'll see green again." "I know," Elizabeth replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Land endures. It's people who sometimes don't." Adam studied her face. "What are you thinking?" "That we can't wait for Thornton to make another move," she said, determination hardening her voice. "We need to implement our plan immediately, before he tries something worse." "Agreed. I'll ride to town today, send the telegrams we prepared. If the bank in Denver agrees to our proposal, we could have everything in place within days." Elizabeth nodded, her mind already racing ahead to the next steps. "I'll speak with the neighboring ranchers. After this, they'll be more willing to stand with us against Thornton." They worked separately throughout the day, Adam heading to town while Elizabeth rode to nearby ranches, explaining their plan and seeking support. By nightfall, when Adam returned, they had the beginnings of a coalition. small ranchers who had suffered under Thornton's expansion and were eager for an alternative. "The Denver Bank has agreed to our terms," Adam announced as they sat at the kitchen table, maps and papers spread before them. "They'll refinance the Rocking P debts and provide additional capital on one condition." "What condition?" "If Thornton wants to discuss correspondence, he can come himself," Adam replied. "Like a man, not sending thugs in the night." One of the other men stepped forward, pressing his gun barrel against Adam's chest. "We ain't asking nice again, Stone. The letter. Now, or we start breaking things, starting with your fingers." Fear and fury surged through Elizabeth in equal measure. These men had invaded her home, threatened her brother, all on Thornton's orders. Without conscious thought, she raised her father's revolver and fired a shot into the ceiling. The crack of the gunshot froze everyone below. Elizabeth descended the stairs, her weapon trained steadily on Miller. "The next shot won't be a warning," she announced, her voice remarkably steady despite her racing heart. "Drop your guns. All of you." Miller's eyes narrowed, calculating whether she would actually fire. Elizabeth met his gaze unflinchingly, letting him see her determination. "Miss Prescott," he said finally, lowering his weapon slightly, "this doesn't concern you. Just a private matter between Stone and Mr. Thornton." "This is my home," Elizabeth replied coldly. "Anything that happens here concerns me. Now drop your guns, or I'll show you exactly how good a shot William Prescott taught his daughter to be." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, from outside, came the sound of approaching riders, the ranch hands, alerted by the gunshot. Miller cursed under his breath. "This ain't over," he warned, backing toward the door. His companions followed, keeping their weapons ready but lowered. "It will be," Adam promised quietly, "sooner than Thornton realizes." After Miller and his men had fled, disappearing into the night before the ranch hands could intercept them, Elizabeth lowered her revolver with shaking hands. "Are you hurt?" she asked, scanning Adam for injuries. "No," he assured her, gently taking the weapon from her grasp. "Thanks to you." He led her to a chair, concern in his eyes. "You could have been killed, Elizabeth. Those men wouldn't hesitate to shoot a woman." "They were going to hurt you," she replied simply, as if that explained everything. Then, as the adrenaline began to fade, she remembered what she had overheard. What letter were they talking about? "Something from my mother to Thornton." Adam sighed heavily, rubbing a hand across his face. "I was hoping to protect you from this part of the past, but I suppose you have a right to know." He crossed to his saddlebags, which hung on a hook near the door, and extracted a worn envelope from an inner pocket. The paper was yellowed with age, the handwriting faded but distinctly feminine. "Catherine wrote this to Thornton after she left him for your father," Adam explained, holding the letter but not offering it to Elizabeth. "It contains revelations that would destroy the reputation Thornton has built for himself in this territory." "What kind of revelations?" Adam hesitated. "The kind that involve fraud, theft, and worse. Thornton wasn't always the wealthy cattle baron he is now. He started with nothing and took what he wanted by any means necessary. And my mother knew this. Why didn't she expose him years ago? Because the letter also contains personal details about her, about the circumstances of my birth." Adam's expression was pained. Catherine protected her secrets by keeping Thornton's. A stalemate that lasted until her death. Elizabeth processed this, connecting pieces of the complex history between her mother, Thornton, and ultimately herself. "So Thornton has always known who you are, her son." "Yes," Adam confirmed. "And he's always feared this letter might surface. It's why he watched the Rocking P for so long, why he was so determined to gain control after your father died. Not just for the land, but to ensure this never came to light." Elizabeth studied her brother's face, seeing the burden he had carried alone. "You've had this all along, haven't you? Why not use it against him before now?" "Because it's not just Thornton who would be hurt by its contents," Adam replied softly. "The past has sharp edges, Elizabeth. Sometimes it's better left undisturbed." She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Not when that past threatens our future. Whatever secrets that letter contains, they're part of our history, yours and mine. We face it together." After a moment's hesitation, Adam placed the envelope in her outstretched palm. "Read it privately," he advised. "And remember that Catherine made her choices in a different time, with fewer options than you have now." As dawn approached, Elizabeth sat alone in her father's study, the contents of her mother's letter spread before her. The revelations were indeed shocking. Details of Thornton's early crimes, including the murder of a business partner whose wealth had funded his first ranch purchase. But more personal were Catherine's confessions about her relationship with Thornton, the circumstances of Adam's birth, and her eventual escape with William Prescott's help. The woman who emerged from those faded pages was more complex than the gentle mother of Elizabeth's childhood memories. Braver, more flawed, more human. Catherine Prescott had survived abuse, made difficult choices, and ultimately found the strength to build a new life, not just for herself, but for both her children, even when it meant painful separation. By the time Adam found her as sunlight streamed through the study windows, Elizabeth had made her decision. "We won't use the letter," she declared, gathering the pages carefully. "Not unless there's absolutely no alternative." Adam studied her face. "You're protecting Thornton?" "No," she replied firmly. "I'm protecting our mother's memory and giving us the chance to defeat Thornton on our own terms, not through blackmail or threats, but by building something stronger than his empire." A slow smile spread across Adam's face, pride mingled with relief. William would have approved of that decision. He always believed in doing things the right way, even when the wrong way seemed easier. "Then that's what we'll do," Elizabeth stated, her resolve hardening. "Starting today, the bank representative will be here tomorrow. By the end of the week, we'll have financing secured and a coalition of ranchers united against Thornton's monopoly." Adam nodded, determination matching her own. "And when Thornton realizes he can't intimidate us or buy us out, then," Elizabeth said with quiet confidence, "he'll have to accept that some things aren't for sale. Not land, not water, and certainly not the Prescott legacy." What neither of them anticipated was how quickly Thornton would move once he realized his midnight raid had failed, or how personal his final attack would become. The bank representative from Denver, Mr. Lawrence Holloway, arrived punctually the following afternoon, a precise, methodical man whose scrutiny of the Rocking Peas operations was thorough but fair. Elizabeth and Adam led him through inspections of the property, livestock, and financial records, answering his questions with transparent honesty. "Well," Holloway announced as they concluded their tour at the main house, "I must say the Rocking Pea impresses me. Despite recent challenges, you've maintained quality stock and sound practices." He adjusted his spectacles, reviewing his notes. "I see no reason why our institution shouldn't proceed with the financing arrangement we discussed." Relief washed over Elizabeth. "That's wonderful news, Mr. Holloway. There is, however, one matter requiring clarification," Holloway continued, his tone shifting slightly. "The question of legal partnership between you two." He glanced between Elizabeth and Adam. "While the documentation provided confirms your status as siblings, the bank's directors are concerned about perception." Adam frowned. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Holloway?" The banker cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Merely that in frontier communities, certain arrangements can be misinterpreted. A business partnership between an unmarried woman and man, living on the same property, half-siblings," Elizabeth interrupted firmly. "Sharing management of an inheritance. Surely your directors understand family enterprises." Of course," Holloway assured her hastily. "It's simply a matter of documentation. Perhaps if we had testimony from respected community members confirming your relationship or additional legal certification." A commotion outside interrupted his explanation. Elizabeth moved to the window to see James Thornton dismounting in the yard, flanked by Frank Miller and several other men. Unlike their midnight visit, this confrontation would happen in broad daylight. "It seems we have unexpected visitors," she observed, turning to Adam with a meaningful look. "Mr. Thornton appears to have business with us." Adam's jaw tightened as he peered outside. "Stay here with Mr. Holloway. I'll deal with this." "No," Elizabeth countered firmly. "We face him together. As partners." Holloway glanced between them nervously. "Perhaps I should remain inside while you address this situation." "Actually, Mr. Holloway," Elizabeth replied, a sudden inspiration striking her, "I think you should witness this. It may clarify certain matters for your directors." They stepped onto the porch together as Thornton approached, his expression a mask of cold civility that did nothing to conceal the anger beneath. "Miss Prescott," he greeted her with a slight nod before his gaze shifted to Adam. "Stone, I see you're still hiding behind a woman's skirts. State your business," Thornton, Adam replied evenly. We have a busy day ahead. Thornton's smile was razor-thin. Indeed you do. Preparing for an auction takes considerable effort, after all. There won't be any auction, Elizabeth informed him. The Rocking P's debts are being refinanced through the Continental Bank of Denver. She gestured to Holloway, who stood on a creative story, he finally said, his voice tight. But ultimately irrelevant. The court order stands. Until ownership is legally settled, the Rocking P remains in jeopardy. He turned to leave but paused, glancing back at Elizabeth. My offer remains open, Miss Prescott. Marriage would resolve these complications quite effectively. I'd rather lose the ranch than marry you, Elizabeth replied coldly. Fortunately, neither outcome is likely. As Thornton and his men rode away, Holloway cleared his throat nervously. I must say, this does complicate matters from the bank's perspective. Legal challenges to ownership present significant risks. The court order is baseless, Adam assured him. It will be dismissed once the judge reviews the full documentation. Perhaps, Holloway conceded. But legal proceedings take time the Rocking P doesn't have, given the approaching deadline. Elizabeth felt despair threatening to overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. They had been so close to securing the ranch's future, only to have Thornton snatch victory away through legal manipulation. Then Adam spoke, his voice quiet but determined. There's another way, Mr. Holloway. One that would remove any question of legitimate partnership while preserving the Rocking P's operations. Both Elizabeth and the banker looked at him questioningly. A marriage of convenience, Adam explained. Between Miss Prescott and myself. Elizabeth gasped, shock rendering her momentarily speechless. Adam, that's a business arrangement, he continued smoothly. One that would legally consolidate ownership of the Rocking P while eliminating the concerns your directors raised about our living arrangements. Holloway blinked rapidly, adjusting his spectacles. But the familial relationship, half-siblings, Adam clarified. With different fathers. Such marriages, while uncommon, aren't without precedent in establishing clear property rights. Elizabeth found her voice at last. Adam, you can't seriously be suggesting this. It would be on paper only, he assured her, his eyes conveying a message beyond his words. A temporary solution until the legal challenges are resolved. At which point, if you wished, an annulment would be simple to obtain. Holloway coughed discreetly. I cannot speak to the ethical considerations of such an arrangement, but from a strictly legal and financial perspective, it would indeed simplify matters considerably. Elizabeth's mind raced, weighing the shocking proposal against their dwindling options. A marriage, even one in name only, to her half-brother was beyond anything she had contemplated. Yet if it saved the Rocking P from Thornton's grasp. May I have a moment alone with Mr. Stone? She requested, her voice remarkably steady despite her inner turmoil. Holloway nodded quickly, seeming relieved at the chance to remove himself from the uncomfortable discussion. Of course, I'll review my notes in the study. When the banker had disappeared inside, Elizabeth turned to Adam, her expression a mixture of confusion and indignation. Have you lost your mind? Marriage? To each other. It's a legal solution to a legal problem, Adam replied calmly. Nothing more. It's preposterous. People would talk for generations. And what about, she lowered her voice despite their privacy, the letter? If Thornton discovered we had married, wouldn't he use that knowledge to suggest impropriety between us? Adam's expression remained serious. He might try, but we would have documentation of our relationship, testimony from those who knew Catherine and William. The marriage would be recognized as what it is, a business arrangement to protect our shared inheritance. And you would be willing to do this? Elizabeth asked, studying his face. Tie yourself to me, to this place, through a false marriage. Something shifted in Adam's eyes, a warmth, a depth of feeling that surprised her. Not false, Elizabeth. A marriage of convenience. Yes, but based on genuine partnership. We've proven these past months that we work well together, that we share the same vision for the Rocking P. But marriage would change nothing about our daily lives, he assured her, except that it would secure our legal standing and defeat Thornton's latest maneuver. Elizabeth turned away, gazing across the ranch that had become so central to her identity, the land her father had loved, that her mother had chosen as her home, that now represented both her past and her future. To lose it to Thornton would be unbearable. There must be another way, she said finally, though with less conviction. If you can think of one, I'm listening, Adam replied gently. But we're running out of time and options. Elizabeth faced him again, searching his features for any sign of hesitation or doubt. She found only steady resolve and something deeper, a devotion to the rocking pea and to her that transcended conventional boundaries. The marriage would be in name only, she clarified, needing absolute certainty. A business partnership formalized to meet legal requirements. Exactly, Adam confirmed. With the understanding that once Thornton's threat is eliminated and the ranch secured, you would be free to make other arrangements if you wished. The unspoken implication hung between them, that someday Elizabeth might want a real marriage, a family of her own. Adam was offering her a temporary shield, not a lifetime commitment. And if I agreed to this unusual solution, she said slowly, how quickly could it be arranged? Judge Patterson is in town today, Adam replied promptly, revealing that he had considered this option more thoroughly than he'd initially suggested. He's a fair man, uninfluenced by Thornton. With Mr. Holloway as witness, we could have the ceremony performed this afternoon and the documentation filed before Thornton could mount any new challenge. Elizabeth took a deep breath, the magnitude of the decision weighing heavily on her shoulders. It was unconventional, potentially scandalous, and yet pragmatically effective. Exactly the kind of bold move that had built the West, where survival often demanded solutions that Eastern society would find unthinkable. Mr. Holloway, she called, her decision made. Would you please rejoin us? We have a proposal for your bank that will resolve all concerns about partnership and property rights. The banker emerged cautiously, clearly uncertain what he was walking into. Yes, Miss Prescott. Elizabeth straightened her spine, summoning the confidence her decision required. Mr. Stone and I will be married this afternoon. The bank will then deal with a single, legally unified ownership of the rocking pea. Will that satisfy your director's concerns? Holloway's eyebrows shot upward, but to his credit, he recovered quickly. Well, yes, that would certainly establish clear title and eliminate any questions about living arrangements or business relationship. Excellent, Elizabeth replied briskly, as though they were discussing cattle prices rather than matrimony. Then if you'll accompany us to town as witness, we can proceed with both the ceremony and the financial arrangements immediately. As they prepared to depart, Elizabeth felt a curious mixture of emotions, determination, anxiety, and something unexpected, a sense of rightness about the path they had chosen. Not the marriage itself, which remained a pragmatic fiction in her mind, but the partnership it would formalize. Adam Stone had come into her life as a stranger, revealed himself as family, and now would become her husband, all within the span of a few months. The progression was dizzying, defying conventional wisdom and social norms. Yet as they rode toward town, Elizabeth realized that nothing about her life since inheriting the rocking pea had followed expected patterns. Perhaps this unconventional solution was fitting for the unconventional legacy she and Adam shared. What she couldn't anticipate was how Thornton would react when he learned of their marriage, or the lengths to which he would go to prevent it from saving the ranch he coveted. Judge Patterson received them in his chambers with minimal surprise, having spent decades witnessing the practical arrangements frontier life often necessitated. After reviewing their documentation and listening to their explanation, he agreed to perform the ceremony immediately. I understand the legal necessity, he commented, adjusting his robes. But I must ask, are you both entering this union of your own free will, without coercion? We are, Elizabeth confirmed, her voice steadier than she had expected. And you understand the nature of the commitment you're making? Marriage isn't merely a business arrangement, despite your intentions. Adam met the judge's questioning gaze directly. We understand, Your Honor. This decision wasn't made lightly. Patterson studied them for a moment longer, then nodded. Very well. Mr. Holloway, you'll serve as witness along with my clerk. Let's proceed. The ceremony itself was brief and utilitarian. Legal language recited in a wood-paneled office with no decorations beyond law books and a territorial map. Elizabeth spoke her responses clearly, focusing on the practical purpose rather than the traditional meaning behind the words. Only when Adam placed a simple gold band on her finger, his mother's ring, he had explained quietly, saved all these years, did the reality of what they were doing truly register? This was marriage, whatever their intentions or explanations. In the eyes of the law and society, they would be husband and wife. By the authority vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you man and wife, Judge Patterson declared, closing his book. The clerk will prepare the certificate. As Miller stormed away, presumably to report to Thornton, Adam turned to Elizabeth with concern in his eyes. That was dangerous, suggesting we might use the letter against him. But effective, she countered. Thornton can't know for certain what evidence we have or how we might use it. That uncertainty gives us leverage. Adam shook his head, a reluctant smile touching his lips. You're more like Catherine than I realized. She had that same steel beneath the surface, a willingness to play a dangerous game when necessary. Elizabeth accepted the comparison as the compliment it was intended to be. Let's hope I have her skill at winning such games as well. They spent the remainder of the day completing their business in town, finalizing paperwork with Holloway, arranging for supplies to be delivered to the ranch, and informing their small crew of the changed circumstances. To their credit, the men accepted the news of the marriage without visible judgment, though Elizabeth noticed speculative glances exchanged. By the time they returned to the Rocking Pea, word had spread throughout the county. Neighbors rode over, ostensibly to offer congratulations, but clearly curious about the sudden union. Elizabeth and Adam maintained their united front, explaining the practical nature of their arrangement while allowing others to draw their own conclusions. As darkness fell, they found themselves alone on the porch, watching distant lightning flicker over the mountains. Do you regret it? Adam asked quietly, breaking a comfortable silence. The decision we made today? Elizabeth considered the question seriously before answering. No, it was the right solution to an impossible situation. Unorthodox, certainly, but effective. And when the immediate crisis passes, when Thornton's threat is neutralized completely. She understood what he was asking, whether she would seek the annulment they had discussed as a possibility. The question held more weight than it might have hours earlier, before they had stood before a judge and spoken vows neither had expected to exchange. I don't know, she admitted honestly. This partnership we've built, it works, Adam. The ranch is thriving under our combined management. Why dismantle something effective simply because it began as a practical solution rather than a conventional arrangement? Relief flickered across his features before his expression settled into careful neutrality. The decision will always be yours, Elizabeth. I meant what I said. This marriage changes nothing about our daily relationship unless you wish it to. She studied him in the fading light, seeing beyond the competent rancher to the man beneath, the half-brother who had returned to protect her, the partner who respected her abilities, the friend who had become essential to her vision for the Rocking Pea's future. What about your wishes? She asked quietly. This arrangement limits your options as much as mine. Adam's smile held a gentle sadness. My options were limited long before today, Elizabeth. Men with my background, my history with Thornton, we don't typically find conventional happiness. That's not true, she protested. You could have any life you chose. Any woman would be fortunate too. She stopped abruptly, realizing her words revealed more than she had intended. Adam's gaze sharpened, searching her face for meaning beyond the half-finished sentiment. To what? He prompted softly. Elizabeth looked away, suddenly unable to meet his eyes. To have a partner with your skills, your integrity. It wasn't what she had almost said, and they both knew it. A new tension hummed between them, unacknowledged but impossible to ignore completely. We should get some rest, Adam suggested finally, breaking the charged silence. Tomorrow we need to prepare for Thornton's next move. He won't accept defeat easily. Elizabeth nodded, grateful for the return to practical matters. Good night, then. As she rose to enter the house, Adam caught her hand lightly, his touch brief but warm. For what it's worth, Elizabeth, of all the unexpected turns my life has taken, finding you and the Rocking Pea has been the most welcome. The simple sincerity of his words touched her more deeply than elaborate declarations might have. Good night, Adam, she replied softly, her voice steadier than her racing heart. Inside, as she prepared for bed, Elizabeth found herself examining the wedding band on her finger, tangible evidence of the day's extraordinary events. A marriage of convenience, they had called it. A practical solution to a legal problem. Yet as she drifted toward sleep, Elizabeth couldn't help wondering if convenience and practicality were the only foundations for their partnership, or if something deeper had been building between them since Adam first rode into the rocking pea. What she didn't know was that Adam sat awake long into the night, turning similar questions over in his mind while watching the ranch house from his position on the porch, standing guard against threats he feared might come before dawn. Thornton's response, when it came, took a different form than either of them had anticipated. There was no midnight raid, no legal challenge to their marriage, no direct confrontation. Instead, he employed a more insidious weapon, rumor. Within days, whispers spread through the county, insinuations about the true nature of Adam and Elizabeth's relationship, questions about their mother's character, suggestions that the marriage was a cover for impropriety that had existed before their familial connection was revealed. "It's clever," Adam acknowledged grimly as they discussed the situation over breakfast. "Direct attacks failed, so he's trying to isolate us socially. Make us pariahs too tainted for decent folks to support." Elizabeth pushed her plate away, appetite gone. "Some of the women at church yesterday wouldn't meet my eyes. And Mrs. Fletcher at the general store asked if we were comfortable with our arrangement, as though expecting me to confess some moral distress. Thornton knows that out here, a ranch needs community support to survive," Adam explained. "Neighbors to help during roundup, local businesses willing to extend credit during tight times, customers who'll buy your stock without prejudice. So he's trying to cut us off from those relationships," Elizabeth concluded. "Undermine our standing so thoroughly that even those who supported us will distance themselves." Adam nodded, his expression troubled. "It's already working with some. The Hendersons sent word they can't participate in the cooperative after all, and 2 other ranchers are reconsidering." Elizabeth felt a surge of anger, not just at Thornton, but at the community's willingness to believe the worst about them. "So we fought through fire, financial threats, and legal manipulation, only to be defeated by gossip?" "We're not defeated yet," Adam countered firmly. "Thornton underestimates one crucial factor." "What's that?" "The truth," he replied simply. "It has a power all its own, especially when delivered with conviction." This philosophy was put to the test later that day when Reverend Thomas, the local minister, rode out to the rocking pea. His expression as he dismounted was grave, his manner formal as he greeted them. "Mrs. Prescott Stone, Mr. Stone," he began, accepting their offer of coffee but declining refreshments. "I hope you'll forgive my unexpected visit, but there are matters of concern within the congregation that I felt obliged to address directly." Elizabeth exchanged a glance with Adam before responding. "You're always welcome here, Reverend. I assume these matters of concern relate to our recent marriage." The minister nodded, clearly uncomfortable but determined. "There has been talk. Questions about the propriety of your arrangement, given your family connection. As your spiritual advisor, I felt it my duty to seek clarification." Adam leaned forward. "What exactly are people saying, Reverend? It's better we know directly." Reverend Thomas sighed heavily. "Some suggest your relationship preceded knowledge of your kinship. Others question whether such knowledge exists at all, whether it might be a fiction created to explain an otherwise inappropriate attachment." Elizabeth felt heat rise in her cheeks, more from anger than embarrassment. "And you, Reverend? Do you share these suspicions?" "I try to withhold judgment where possible," he replied diplomatically. "But I confess the sudden nature of your marriage, following so quickly upon the revelation of your relationship as half-siblings, has created inevitable questions." "Questions fueled by James Thornton," Adam stated flatly. "Who stands to benefit most if the community turns against us?" The minister shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Thornton has indeed expressed concerns. As one of the church's most generous supporters, his opinion carries weight." "Of course it does," Elizabeth murmured, understanding fully now how thoroughly Thornton had embedded himself in the community's power structure. "Money usually speaks louder than truth." "That's unfair, Mrs. Prescott Stone," Reverend Thomas protested. "The church values truth above all, which is why I've come to hear yours directly." Elizabeth rose, crossing to her father's desk where she retrieved several documents. Her parents' marriage certificate, Adam's birth record, legal affidavits from those who had known Catherine before her marriage to William. "Here is our truth, Reverend," she said, placing the papers before him. "Documented, verified proof of our relationship. Our mother married William Prescott when Adam was 11 years old. He lived and worked on this ranch under arrangements made by my father's family, who wouldn't accept Catherine's son from a previous relationship. As the minister examined the documents, Adam continued the explanation. When William fell ill, he made provisions for both of Catherine's children to share in his legacy. Our marriage was a legal solution to challenges raised against those provisions, nothing more. Eleanor's smile was sad. Not well, just enough to understand why James never forgot her, or forgave her for choosing William instead. She glanced around the gathering. You've built something impressive here, both of you. Don't let James destroy it with his bitterness. Before Elizabeth could respond, Eleanor pressed something into her hand, a small key. The county records office. Southwest cabinet, bottom drawer. There are documents James doesn't want found about water rights, property boundaries, things that would interest the other ranchers in your coalition. With that cryptic message, Eleanor rejoined the party, departing shortly afterward with a polite farewell that gave no hint of their exchange. As the last guests left that evening, Elizabeth showed Adam the key, relaying Eleanor's information. What do you think it means? Adam examined the key thoughtfully. Thornton's been manipulating property records for years. We already suspected as much. But actual proof would be invaluable, especially to ranchers who've lost water access without understanding how or why. We should investigate immediately, Elizabeth suggested, before Thornton realizes Eleanor has helped us again. It's risky, Adam cautioned. Breaking into the records office, even with a key, could be construed as criminal activity. Not breaking in, Elizabeth corrected. Mr. Peterson, the county clerk, was here tonight. He seemed particularly supportive. Perhaps he could assist us officially. Adam's expression shifted from concern to admiration. You're thinking like a rancher now, finding the legal path to what needs doing. The following morning, they rode into town together, presenting themselves at the county clerk's office with a carefully constructed request. Peterson, a meticulous man with 30 years' experience maintaining county records, listened with increasing interest as they explained their suspicions about altered documents. Such allegations are serious, he noted, adjusting his spectacles. But not, I regret to say, entirely surprising. There have been irregularities I've observed over the years, particularly regarding water rights along Thornton's expanding boundaries. Would you be willing to investigate officially? Elizabeth asked. As county clerk, you have the authority to examine and authenticate all property records. Peterson hesitated only briefly before nodding. I've been considering retirement next year. Perhaps it's time to ensure the records I've maintained for 3 decades are in proper order before I depart. With the clerk's cooperation, they accessed the southwest cabinet Eleanor had identified. The bottom drawer contained boundary surveys, water rights allocations, and property transfers dating back 15 years. Many bearing alterations that Peterson immediately identified as unauthorized. These changes weren't made through proper legal channels, he confirmed, indignation evident in his voice. The original boundaries have been modified without hearings or notifications to affected parties. Can you document the discrepancies? Adam asked. Create certified copies showing both the original records and the alterations? I can, and I will, Peterson assured them, professional pride clearly offended by the tampering. Such documentation would stand up in any territorial court. By mid-afternoon, they departed the records office with a portfolio of certified copies, evidence that Thornton had systematically encroached on neighboring properties through fraudulent record alterations. Most significantly, the documents proved that water rights along the eastern boundary of the Rocking P had been illegally transferred to Thornton Holdings without proper compensation or legal process. This is more than leverage, Adam observed as they secured the documents in Elizabeth's saddlebag. It's the foundation for legal action against Thornton, not just by us, but by every rancher affected by these manipulations. Elizabeth nodded, understanding the full implications. The cooperative we've been organizing could become the vehicle for a collective lawsuit. United, the smaller ranchers would have the resources to challenge Thornton in court. Exactly. And with Peterson's testimony supporting the documentation, Adam's strategic analysis was interrupted by shouts from further down the street. They turned to see Frank Miller emerging from the saloon, pointing in their direction while addressing several of Thornton's men. Time to leave, Adam muttered, helping Elizabeth mount quickly. They must have seen us at the records office. They rode out of town at a controlled pace, fast enough to put distance between themselves and potential pursuit, but not so rapid as to suggest flight. Once beyond the town limits, however, Adam led them off the main road onto a less traveled trail through dense pines. "We're being followed," he explained, glancing back at the dust rising behind them. 4 riders, moving quickly. Elizabeth felt her heart race, but kept her voice steady. "What's the plan?" "We split up," Adam decided after a moment's consideration. "You take the documents and continue toward the ranch. I'll create a diversion, draw them away from your trail." "Absolutely not," Elizabeth countered firmly. "We're not separating. That's exactly what they want, to isolate us, make us vulnerable." Adam started to argue but stopped, recognizing the determination in her expression. "You're right," he conceded. "Together, then. But we need to move faster." They pushed their horses harder, following the twisting trail deeper into the foothills that bordered Rocking Pea Land. Elizabeth was grateful for the riding lessons Adam had insisted upon months earlier, her improved skills now potentially the difference between safety and capture. Behind them, the pursuit grew closer, the sound of hoofbeats more distinct despite the forest's muffling effect. "They're gaining," Elizabeth observed, anxiety tightening her chest. Adam nodded grimly. "They know these trails too, and their horses are fresher." He scanned the terrain ahead, making a quick decision. "There's a narrow canyon about half a mile ahead. If we can reach it first, we might be able to lose them in the switchbacks." They urged their mounts forward, ducking low branches and navigating increasingly rocky ground. Elizabeth concentrated on maintaining her seat while keeping the precious saddlebag secure against her side. The canyon appeared before them, a slash in the hillside with steep walls and a trail barely wide enough for a single horse. Adam gestured for Elizabeth to enter first, following close behind as the path began its twisting ascent. "Keep moving," he called. "Don't look back." Halfway up the canyon, the first gunshot echoed off the stone walls. Elizabeth flinched but maintained control of her horse, focusing on the path ahead rather than the danger behind. "They're shooting at us," she called back to Adam, disbelief in her voice. "Warning shots," he replied, though he sounded less certain than his words suggested. "Trying to frighten us into stopping." Another shot rang out, closer this time. Elizabeth felt rather than saw stone fragments spray from the canyon wall as a bullet struck near her head. This was no warning. They were shooting to harm, possibly to kill. "Adam," she cried in alarm. "Keep going," he shouted back. "We're almost to the top." The trail widened as they approached the canyon's upper end. Elizabeth urged her horse into a gallop as soon as the path allowed, breaking into open ground with Adam close behind. Before them stretched a high meadow bordering Rocking Pea Land. If they could cross it, they would reach home territory where neighboring ranchers might provide assistance against Thornton's men. They were halfway across the meadow when Adam's horse stumbled, throwing him forward in the saddle. Elizabeth turned in alarm, seeing him struggle to regain his balance while blood spread across his left shoulder. "You're hit," she gasped, reining in beside him. Adam's face was pale beneath his tan, his jaw clenched against pain. "It's nothing. Keep moving." "It's not nothing," she insisted, reaching across to steady him. "You're bleeding badly." Behind them, their pursuers emerged from the canyon, momentarily pausing at the sight of their quarry, stopped in the open meadow. "Elizabeth, go," Adam urged, his voice strained. "Take the documents and ride for the ranch. I'll hold them off." "I told you before, we're not separating," she replied with fierce determination. Reaching into her saddlebag, she withdrew her father's revolver. "We faced them together." Before Adam could protest further, Elizabeth wheeled her horse around, positioning herself beside him as Thornton's men approached at a measured pace, confident now that their prey was cornered. Frank Miller led the group, his expression shifting from triumph to wariness as he saw the weapon in Elizabeth's hand. He raised his own gun in response, creating a tense standoff across 30 yards of sun-dappled meadow grass. "That's far enough, Miller," Elizabeth called, her voice remarkably steady despite her racing heart. "The next man who advances gets a bullet." Miller's laugh held no humor. Bold words from a woman who's probably never fired a gun in anger. "Be sensible, Mrs. Stone. Hand over whatever you took from the records office, and we might let you both ride away." "Might," Elizabeth repeated skeptically. "After you've already shot my husband?" I think your intentions are quite clear, Mr. Miller. Adam straightened in his saddle despite his injury, his own weapon now visible. 4 against 2 aren't great odds, Miller, he acknowledged calmly. But I guarantee at least 2 of you won't leave this meadow alive if you push this further. Uncertainty flickered across Miller's face as he assessed the determination in both their expressions. Bravado was one thing. Facing armed opponents prepared to defend themselves to the death